The desert stretched endlessly beneath the burning sun, a land of silence, dust, and forgotten stories, where the wind carried whispers of the past, and every mile looked the same as the last. And on that lonely afternoon, a tired cowboy named Ethan Cole rode slowly across the empty plains with nothing but his horse, his worn hat, and the weight of many quiet years on his shoulders. A man who had long ago learned that the desert did not care about a man's pain, his memories, or his regrets, and so he simply rode forward like he had done every day for years, until suddenly, far ahead on the shimmering horizon, he saw something that made him pull the reins of his horse and narrow his eyes, because standing alone in the middle of the endless desert was a small figure that did not belong there. A tiny girl no older than 7, barefoot in the hot sand, her long dark hair tangled by the wind, her clothes dusty and torn, and her fragile body swaying slightly like she had walked too far and had nothing left. And Ethan felt something tighten inside his chest, because no child should ever be alone in a place like this. So he slowly rode closer and gently climbed down from his horse, so he would not frighten her. And when the girl looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes that seemed far too old for her small face, he spoke softly in a calm voice, the way a man speaks to a frightened animal in the wild, asking her where her family was and why she was alone in the desert. But the girl only whispered that they were gone and that she did not know where to go anymore. And that was when Ethan noticed the small necklace hanging around her neck, a simple piece of leather with a carved wooden symbol that immediately caught his attention because it was an Apache tribal mark, something he had seen many years ago but never expected to see again. And suddenly the quiet desert felt heavier with questions he could not yet answer. But one thing was clear to him. Night was coming, and the desert was no place for a lost child. So without another word, he lifted the weak girl onto his horse and rode toward his lonely cabin near the dry riverbed miles away, where the wind howled through the wooden walls and the lantern light flickered softly inside. And when he gave the girl water and food, she ate like someone who had not seen kindness in days, her small hands trembling as she held the cup. And when he finally asked her name, she quietly said, "Lena," a name that somehow echoed strangely in Ethan's mind, like a memory buried deep beneath years of dust and silence. Yet he said nothing, because some memories are too heavy to wake too quickly. And that night, as the wind roared outside and the stars covered the desert sky, the lost Apache girl finally fell asleep near the fire, while the lonely cowboy sat quietly in his chair, watching the flames, unaware that the child he had found wandering alone in the desert was carrying a secret, tied to a woman from his past, a secret that would soon rise from the shadows of forgotten years and change the course of his lonely life forever. The night passed slowly over the quiet desert, and the first light of morning crept across the horizon as the cold wind softened, and the sky slowly turned golden, while inside the small wooden cabin, Ethan Cole sat awake in his chair, staring into the fading fire as the little Apache girl slept peacefully nearby, her small body finally resting after what must have been a long and frightening journey across the desert. And although Ethan had lived most of his life alone and had grown used to silence, something about the girl's presence had changed the feeling of the cabin, as if a forgotten chapter of his past had quietly walked back into his life without warning. And when Lena slowly opened her eyes the next morning and looked around the unfamiliar room with quiet curiosity, Ethan gently offered her breakfast and warm water. And while she ate, he studied the necklace around her neck once again, the small carved wooden symbol that clearly belonged to the Apache people. And the more he looked at it, the more a distant memory pressed against his mind, like a door that had been locked for years but was now beginning to open. And finally he asked Lena where she had come from and how she had ended up alone in the desert. And the girl spoke softly in broken sentences, explaining that her mother had been very sick for a long time and that they had been traveling far from their tribe, because her mother had told her they needed to find someone important, who lived somewhere beyond the desert hills. But before they could reach that place, her mother became too weak to continue, and one night under the cold desert sky she held Lena's hands and told her something she would never forget, telling her that if anything happened, she must continue walking toward the west until she found a lonely cowboy named Ethan Cole, because he was the only man in the world who would protect her. And the moment Ethan heard those words, his heart stopped beating for a second, because that name, his name, coming from the lips of this lost child, felt impossible. And he slowly asked Lena what her mother's name was, and when the girl quietly answered Ayana, the world around, Ethan seemed to freeze as memories from many years ago rushed back like a storm he had tried to bury forever. Because Ayana had once been the most courageous and beautiful Apache woman he had ever known, a woman he had met long ago, during a violent conflict between settlers and the Apache tribe, when Ethan had been a younger man working as a scout across the frontier, and unlike many others, he had never believed the Apache people were his enemies. And during one dangerous journey, he had been badly injured in the mountains where Ayana had secretly helped him survive, hiding him from warriors who might have killed him and nursing him back to health in a hidden canyon where they spent days talking about the world beyond, war and hatred. And in that quiet place far from the violence of men, something powerful had grown between them, something neither of them expected. But the frontier was a cruel place where love between two different worlds rarely survived, and when the fighting between settlers and Apache warriors grew worse, Ethan had been forced to leave before their bond could become anything more than a painful memory. And although he had searched for her afterward, he never found her again, and eventually believed she had returned to her tribe far beyond the mountains. But now, as he looked at the small girl standing inside his cabin, he realized the truth was far deeper than he had ever imagined, because Lena then pulled a small folded piece of cloth from her pocket, something her mother had told her to protect until she found Ethan Cole. And with trembling hands, Ethan opened it and discovered an old silver ring he instantly recognized, the same ring he had once given Ayana before they parted ways all those years ago. A silent promise that no matter how far their worlds were divided, he would never forget her kindness or her courage. And as Ethan held the ring, the final piece of the truth slowly revealed itself inside his heart. Because Lena was not just a lost Apache child wandering through the desert. She was Ayana's daughter, the living piece of a past he believed had disappeared forever. And Lena then told him the last thing her mother had said before she died beneath the stars, that Ethan Cole had once saved her life, and that one day he might save her daughter, too, and that she had always believed he was a man who carried honor in a world that had forgotten it. And as the quiet desert wind moved gently outside the cabin, Ethan felt something inside him break and heal at the same time, realizing that the lonely road he had walked for so many years had suddenly brought him face to face with the greatest responsibility of his life. And from that moment forward, the lost Apache girl would never be alone again, because Ethan Cole made a silent promise that he would protect her, raise her, and honor the memory of the brave woman who had once saved him in the mountains long ago. And as the sun rose high above the desert and the endless land stretched toward a new beginning, the lonely cowboy who had once believed he had nothing left in the world finally understood that destiny had returned to him in the form of a small girl carrying the last gift of a woman he had never truly stopped loving, proving that sometimes the desert does not only take from a man. Sometimes after many long and silent years, it gives something back that changes his life forever. And from that day forward, the story of Ethan Cole and the Apache girl, Lena, became one of the quiet legends of the frontier, a reminder that even in the harsh and unforgiving Wild West, kindness, love, and forgotten promises could still find their way home. across the endless desert.